Alright, in this video I'm going to go ahead and build a 48 volt battery. I am going to be utilizing the EVE 105 amp hour cells. I've got 16 of them in the box. These are from 18650 battery, but they're obviously shipped from China like this, so they're shipped actually very well. We pull one out here, we can take a look at the cell itself. I just did a 48 volt pack with the 280 amp hour batteries, and these are grade A, look to be very good quality batteries, like a grade A battery, so no issues there. I've also got the JBD BMS, same BMS I used for the other pack. So if you want to take a look at putting this one together, you can take a look at that. I've got the 200 amp T-class fuse. I've actually got an active balancer here, and I'll put the link for which one that is. Now what I'm going to do a little bit differently is, instead of top balancing the battery in a standard, fashion that a lot of people do with the USB chargers, the low amperage chargers, to put these all in parallel and then charge them up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually build the battery, put the BMS on it. I'm going to hit it with a 48 volt charger up to the top limits, and I'm going to let the active balancer kick in and do its job, and see if it's actually faster or easier to top balance, because this top balancer, or this active balancer, is a little bit cheaper than a power supply. So we'll see what happens with that. I just kind of want to figure out what's going on. I'm going to be putting the battery in this case here. Should have some extra room. I've got some of the neoprene foam dividers for the batteries, and I have the threaded rod, 3/8 inch threaded rod, and the tubing to cover it, so it's a 1/2 inch outside diameter, 3/8 inch inside diameter, the nuts, washers, and I'm going to be covering it with the tubing. All right, I have one active balancer and I have a couple batteries, and active balancers really are not supposed to be permanently mounted to the battery. In other words, you put it on there, you leave it there till it balances itself out, and then you should remove it. So because this needs to be installed and removed, it would be nice to have an easy way to just disconnect it and then move it from battery to battery as needed. I've heard you maybe might do it 3-4 times a year and balance out your batteries, but so shouldn't be permanently mounted. Now it would be nice to actually have a terminal block that had the BMS leads that go to the battery that are permanently connected, and then if a BMS were to go out, you would just disconnect the terminal blocks for the BMS, replace the BMS, and plug it right back in. And same thing for the active balancer leads. That would be the most ideal situation. Now I have a couple different types. I have some inlines like these, and then I have some side-by-side. One will be coming off of each of the cells. So I'm going to go ahead and do a few of these up and see what we're working with here, and try and get an active balancer going. Alright, after I got all of the BMS leads connected, and I had connected the active balancer leads in this manner, I thought, because the screws are so small for the smaller batteries and there's only one post, I don't like stacking up multiple rings on the battery terminal. I'd like to avoid that. So what I decided to do was take these 3 side-by-sides. I'll hook one connector up to the battery terminal, and then I'll put a BMS lead and a active balancer lead, so it's removable, so I can actually just unplug it and swap them. If a BMS goes bad, I could just swap without having a unscrew the terminals to do that. So I'm kind of converting them over to this method here. I wish I would have thought of it first, but that's okay. These balance leads, I'll cut them with and leave a little bit of cord on them, and I might be able to use them for another future battery. All right, I got all 16 of them, 17 actually. I got an extra minus one, but got all those made up. Leave about that much on there. I can either use it as a connector similar to what I'm doing, or I can, you know, put in a butt splice if I need to utilize these wires. So make them about like that long. Okay, I'll strip all these, I'll connect them, and I'll check some continuity on it. I'm going to go ahead and use these polyfoam sheets as battery separators. So I'll go ahead and measure them out and cut them. The polyfoam separators, or any non-conductive separators, commonly used between the battery cells. This is to help prevent the cells rubbing through the blue plastic wrap that's they're encased in, because the cells could potentially short between the outer aluminum casing of the battery. Now this is going to be a static battery. It's, in other words, it's not in a RV or in a boat where it's going to be moving around. It's also going to be in a fixture, so it doesn't hurt to use the separators. They're very inexpensive, and you know, just a little bit of extra insurance. Are they 100% necessary? No, not really, but again, they're cheap and easy to obtain. All right, these cells are nice and straight. There's no swelling at all in them, so perfect. I'll go ahead and label these now. I've got all the labels on. I've got the battery all squared up here, even on all sides, and again, it's really very, very flush. So I'm going to go ahead and put the fixture on it. All right, I got the squared up battery. I have the fixture set here where I've got the threaded rod on the two end planks, and then I've got the rubber tubing here on it to protect the threads from the marring up the potential case of the battery. So I'm just going to slip this up into here, trim off these end rods. What I do is I have the nut threaded on, so when I cut it, I'll be able to thread the rod, or thread the nut off the rod and touch up the threads. And I'll cut it out to the length of that nut there. 14 1/4. Alright, I've got the fixture pretty well dry fit here, so I'm going to go ahead and put in the end pieces. Get that to slide in there nicely. Okay. The other end piece. Alright, now I'm going to start clamping down the fixture here. Alright, I'm going to just use nuts with lock washers on them. I left the bottom threads a little longer. Get this fixture secure. Snug it down. I'm going to come use a little cross pattern here. I don't want to put a lot of torque on them. It's more to keep them in place as opposed to really doing a lot of compression on them. Okay. All right, so what I've come up with for a mounting solution is I created the cell pack here, and then I created a little bit of a standoff cover, kind of similar to how my other battery is with the BMS mounted on top. There's plenty of space underneath here to get to all the wiring. All the wiring disconnects will be on there, so this will be removable. It'll sit on there, and then the positive terminal is going to come through the T-class fuse here, and it'll exit out this direction. The minus, B minus will come to here, and then the C minus will run out of this side over here. All right, so I made some changes with the case situation here, the crate. This crate here has these two handle openings on each end that I'd, ideally need to cover up. I don't want things crawling inside into the battery, but also it's not nearly as sturdy and there's no cover for it. So I went ahead and changed it up to this Rubbermaid container here. On the very bottom of the container, underneath the cell pack, I put a 2x12, I don't know if we can see it down in there, but I put a 2x12 with the foam layer on top of it, so the batteries sit on top of that foam layer, 2x12. And then of course I have the BMS and the T-class fuse that are mounted to this fixture here that sits on top. Again, it gives probably about an inch and a half of clearance underneath for the batteries. Additionally, if you notice in this clip, I had turned the BMS around. So in essence, that is going to reverse my leads and change my cell numbering, which I'll get to. All right, if we take a closer look here at the BMS and what I'm doing, this BMS, I do have a video on what I did to create these bus bars. So what I decided to do was create a single bus bar to jumper these two. I felt it was going to be a little bit more secure to run one larger wire with a larger nut on it than the two smaller nuts that came with it. As a matter of fact, the nuts that I'm even using for the bus bars themselves are larger or heavier duty than the ones that came with the BMS. So what I'm going to do is these two terminals each are split the carrying capacity of the BMS, which is 200 amps. So they're up to 100 amps for each of them. And what I'm doing is I'm jumpering them at this point, again, so I can use one larger stud and one larger gauge wire instead of multiple smaller wires. It just depends on how you want to do it, but I just kind of felt like this was a little more secure stable of a setup. What I'm doing is I'm going to torque these down to 40 inch-pounds. Stop right there. Okay. And I do have a lock washer on these also. So that's what it looks like. There's plenty of clearance underneath here. And I've got the 200 amp T-class fuse mounted to this fixture also. Okay, I lost some pretty critical video of some things that I wanted to cover about my logic for how I was going to build the pack and why the configuration changed midway. I needed the main negative and positive to come out of this left side of the pack. And there's two ways to really accomplish that. Either you'll get outside terminals as your positive and your negative, or you'll get inside terminals as your positive and your negative. Now that is going to be determined if you jumper this cell from positive to negative on the outside, you'll get this outside configuration. If you jumper the cells from positive to negative on the inside, you'll get positive, negative on the inside. Now, with the smaller batteries, I kind of would prefer to have positive and negative split a little further apart, but it'll work in either configuration. Now,
One of the things to consider is that the bus bars that come with these packs will not bridge this gap. So this connection over here is not possible with a standard bus bar. So either way, you're going to have to build or make some kind of a jumper or a bus bar between these terminals. Now, you could either do that with, battery cable and battery lugs, or if you've got flat bar stock of copper or aluminum, you could create your own bus bars. But this was my original configuration right here, the outside. So this image is the original configuration, and the BMS leads are facing to the left side of the pack. That puts the B minus on the bottom half of the pack, which was labeled cell 1, 2, 3, 4 to cell 8, jumpered over to cell 9, and then that would have led all the way down to cell 16. So my cell number 1, the B minus is always connected to cell number 1. So cell number 1 to the B minus coming out of the C minus. Now this is my main negative coming out of the pack towards the inverter. Uh, Cell 16 is my main positive, comes out, goes through the T-class fuse, also heads to the inverter. Now, generally speaking, as I said, you got to build these bus bars no matter what. But what I did was I had a bus bar that I located that was from my 280 amp hour pack. That would allow me to jumper this inside gap here without having to build another bus bar. I did have to drill out a hole to create the correct spacing here to get it to fit. But by doing that, that put my terminals on the inside and it flips them. It puts the negative on the top and the positive on the bottom side of the pack. So what I had to do here is I flipped the BMS over with the leads coming out of the right side, now putting the BM minus on the top, coming out of what's labeled here as cell 16, but will become cell number 1, out, and it comes into the B minus, out of the B minus to the inverters. The positive comes out of cell 1, labeled as cell 1, comes through the T-class fuse and out to the inverters. So as you can see here, what I did was I peeled off the labels, relabeled this from cell 1 to cell 8, jumpering to cell 9, and then all the way to cell 16. So just be aware that when you put your bus bars or when you put your layout, your battery, you alternate positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. So every other battery is opposite. And you will jumper your bus bars from one cell negative to one cell positive, or positive to negative in this type of configuration with your bus bars. All right, now that we've covered that, let's get back to the battery build.
With this configuration, the cell numbering in essence reverses. So I relabeled them cells 1 through 16 in this direction here, and I'm going to wire up the leads for these terminals. So first one I'm going to have is going to be the B minus. So the B minus will fit over here. Just make sure I keep that cable out of the way. A little bit right there. Okay, so this is the B minus. Okay. Then I left all the positive terminals off. I'll just leave this one loose here a bit until I put cell 1 on there. So the next one is going to be battery 1. Battery 1 positive is going to this terminal. I'm just going to loose set these for now. I'm not going to torque them. This is cell 2 positive. So this is 3 positive. There's the 4 positive. Work my way around and then we'll check the voltages. We've got everything wired, torqued down. Let's check some of these voltages here. So let's make sure we have these leads on here correct and this battery is good. So if I go from negative to positive here, I've got correct voltage 52. Everything's good. Now let's check the leads here for the BMS. Now let me check this first negative here. Kind of got to be careful here a little bit. I'm going to actually put this on the negative terminal to check this one here, first one at least. So I got 3, 2, 6, 5, 9, 8, 13, 16, 19, 23, 26, 29, 32. Now these are all stepping up in 3.2 volt increments here. 39. They should step up in those increments if I wired it right. If I wired something wrong, it won't. So 46. Now that's the first wire of bundle 14. So bundle 14 is actually going to read, should read a whole bunch of them. So I should get 5 more that read. Should have 5 more that read 46. 46. 46. 40. I should have 4 actually. 46. 46. One more. 5 rather. 46. Yeah, okay, now this next one should step up to 49, and then the last one is 50. Okay, so the BMS is wired properly. All right, for right now, since I have it free, I'm going to go ahead and insert the positive and into the T-class fuse here. Okay, no cables are in there. Get that set. Okay, there we go. Get this out. Okay, I'm going to bundle these up. All right, I've cleaned everything up a little bit. I put some wire loom here on the balance leads just to organize it a little bit better. I'm also going to be adding the active balancer. Now I've decided to take a little bit of a different approach here, and instead of going with the traditional top balance, I'm going to hook an active balancer up to this. The JBD has a really low amperage passive balancer built inside of it, but I'm going to use an active balancer to get this battery balanced, top balanced. I'm going to just try that out. I think it might actually work better than doing a traditional top balance. It may take a lot less time. So I'm going to wire the battery up. I'm going to put it on a 48 volt charger with the BMS on, all of its over voltage protection settings set in it, and I'm going to let the active balancer do its job to balance the battery out and see how that works. So I'm going to get this wired up here. I've got my disconnects here so I can quickly move the active balancer from one BMS to another, but you know, quite honestly, I'm thinking about just adding an active balancer to all the battery packs, period. So we'll see. But I've got 2 different wire looms. Let me make sure they're different size. The larger size goes from battery cell 1 negative and cell 1 positive are the first 2 wires. So the first one is battery negative. Again, That's kind of why I went with these disconnects here, these connectors, so I can just insert it and clip it in. Okay, that's one. And then this is, the second one is battery 1. And the active balancer, it's maybe hard to see, but it's got the labels for each of the pins. So the next one is B1 or cell 1 positive. So that's the same basic configuration as how the BMS is configured. It's got one on the negative and one on the positive. So we'll get that inserted, and I'll go all the way around and connect them all. Okay. 9. All right, let me reconfirm these just to be sure. I've got 1 negative, 1 positive, cell 2 positive, cell 3 positive, cell 4 positive, cell 5 positive, cell 6 positive, cell 7 positive, cell 8 positive. Black is cell 9, 10, 11, white is 12, blue is 13, green is 14, yellow 15, and red is cell 16. I think I'm going to move this BMS board down a little bit. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just go ahead and hook up the active balancer over here, see if I can secure it on the board as best I can. It's only going to, a couple screws are going to hold this thing on, so alright, now I'm going to hook up the Bluetooth and the temperature sensors, and really where I'm at, the temperature sensors aren't that important, but you know, it might let me know if the battery is getting too hot. I'm not worried about cold temperatures. So the NTC port, there's 2 sensors. Give each of them a small piece of tape to tape them down. Outsides of the battery here. Well, I'm putting it right in the center of the battery, actually. Okay. Take those down. Alright, and the Bluetooth module goes into the UART port. Okay, that just clicks in. I'm just going to let it hang down on the side here for right now. Alright, I'm going to hook this B negative up to the BMS. So I'm going to put a little more torque on this one because it's a larger M8 bolt. Okay. Alright, I have the battery situated on the shelf where it's going to be. I'm going to run a disconnect down here for the main positive next to the existing battery's disconnect. What I want to be able to do though is lift this battery off and set it on the ground here if I ever need to get into this other battery and do some maintenance on it. So I need to make sure that I run the wires long enough. So for right now, I've got the battery disconnect. I'm going to need to mount that, so it's going to go in this orientation. So these side panels need to come off to access the lugs under there. Alright, I'm running the negative. I'm going to run the negative lead that we just measured out and we put lugs on. This is the out battery out that goes to the bus bar to the inverters. Supply power to the inverters. So right now the opposite end of the lead is not, the opposite end of this lead is not hooked up to anything yet. I'm just installing this on a C-. You want to get the B- and C- set before you plug in the balance lead. So, all right, let's check the voltages here. If I'm over on the B-, I should have full power. Here, when I go to the positive, I do 52.65. If I come over to the C-, there should be a nominal amount because the BMS really isn't hooked up and active and on, so that's correct. Again, we checked all the leads. I've got everything worked out. The active balancer and some wire looms here on both sides. I got the Bluetooth module, the temperature sensors in there, and I'm going to go ahead and fire up. We already checked all the voltages on the BMS, so we're going to go ahead and just plug it in. Plug in the BMS. Okay, that's the main wire loom, and then this is the second one. Okay, and we have a blue light for the GPS, so I don't know if you can see that there under the GPS. So that's just, it's not for the GPS, it's just that the BMS has power to it now. The Bluetooth module is not lit up yet, but that's because I've got to get a Bluetooth module or a Bluetooth. Let me rearrange these wires a little bit. I got to get a Bluetooth connected to it, device connected to it, and I'll do that here in just a second. Alright, so take a look. This is the large battery, so let me get rid of that. So I only had one battery before the large battery. Now I've got the second battery showing up right here. So we'll go into this battery, and the Bluetooth module is powered on now. Basically just showing that, you know, I have connectivity there. So that's interesting. Cell 3 is showing 1 volt, cell 2 is showing 5 volts. Let me cross check it with my voltmeter here. That shouldn't nearly be showing that kind of a voltage like that. Put that there. My voltmeter here. Cell 2 negative, positive. I've got 3.297 reading on the battery, the actual battery. And I checked them all before and they were all correct. 3.297. So that is the BMS. Let me check the leads here. Oh, that thing came disconnected. All right, let me pause on this thing here. Let me unplug this BMS. One of my leads came undone. Okay, let me just unplug these. So cell 2, yep, it came undone. Okay, all right, we're connected. Moving this thing around, I must have pulled one of those out. Let me just pull all these leads here, recheck them. Solid here. Alright, let's fire this up again. Alright, I'm only showing the large battery again. Let me replug this back in. There's the main set. That battery immediately showed up on the list, the device list. Alright, I'm going to connect to the new battery here. It's got 52.64, that's what it's reading, which is correct. Alright, now that looks that looks more normal. I've got a difference between the cells of 0.037 millivolts, so they're very, very close as a complete set as they are, so that's really good. That's excellent. If we take a closer look at the app, it shows the voltages across the different batteries, and it gives a calculation on an estimate for the algorithm about how much capacity there is in the battery. So this thing is showing 39%, and it could be a little bit varied, but these voltages that are showing on each of the individual cells on the BMS are showing very close to what my voltmeter was when I tested them all. So now I'm going to go through the different configurations just to make sure that it understands. I'm going to let the BMS read this here, and the battery capacity, this is a 105 amp hour battery, so it's not, this number is wrong, so it's a 105. So 105,000 milliamp hours. So we'll save that there. And the total cycle capacity is going to, I'm going to put that at about 95,000 milliamp hours. Cell voltage, full voltage, 3550, that's good. Cell minimum 28 is good. I'll leave that for now. These capacities are pretty close. I'll adjust them later. Balancer enabled. Balance when charging. I want to turn the load detect off. The switch is off. There's no switch on this one. I have the cord for the switch, but it's not hooked up. Alright. And the switch would be an on and off switch. Sometimes if your battery, if this switch is enabled and you don't have a switch, or you're not bridging the connection gap, then your battery won't turn on. So ask me how I learned that the hard way. I don't know how it got switched one time, but my battery just stopped working, and for some reason the switch got reset. I don't know, I've never used it, but anyway, so I'm going to write that to the BMS. Continue writing. Yes, it should recalculate. It was set at a 200 amp hour battery, so we'll go back into the BMS. This is showing as a 105 amp hour battery now, and it shows 40.95 amps in it. Charges, I'm going to turn the charge off. Yes. Turn the discharge off. Yes, because I don't want it discharging anything when I hook it up. So the charge is off, the discharge is off. I'm going to go ahead and run the positive wire and the negative wire to the inverter, and then we'll flip it on. Again, I'm going to, you know what, I'm going to hook up the active balancer right now, and let's take a look at the BMS. So I'm going to toggle the balancer. It's actually balancing now, but this is balancing off of the JBD BMS, and it would take a long time to balance. The active balancer puts much more power through it. So I'm going to go ahead and hook up the active balancer here. Okay, all looking good there. So I've got my larger plug on this port side here. Let me get this plugged in, and then the opposite harness here. Put down this phone. The opposite harness here on this side on. And there is an orange light. It's hard to see. Maybe you can see if I turn this upper light on. Now you can see an orange light from this active balancer. So the active balancer is on right now. So that's good. So everything's up and running. Active balancer, the BMS leads, and the Bluetooth. And this thing is going to balance much quicker. I've seen this thing balance it pretty well. Right now, I've got a high of 3.294, a low of 3.259, and the difference is 0.035. I'd like to see that around 0.010 or less. 0.005 would be good. All right, I'm going to check one more thing. I'm going to check the charge and discharge switch on the app for the BMS. So right now I should have full power between the B negative and the positive, which I do. Now I should have nothing going between the positive and the C minus because the switch is off, or I have a nominal amount, which is correct. So if I come back to this app and I turn the discharge switch to on, discharging port on, yes, okay, it's on. Now I should be getting a reading from the positive to the negative here of 50. Yeah, so I got full. So that's telling me that the switch for the BMS is working properly, so we're good there. So I'm going to turn it back off. It's asking discharge port off, yes. There, showing it's off on the BMS. And now just to reconfirm this, I've got, yeah, okay, good. So we're good there. All right, so I've connected one end. This is going to go to this direction here. It's going to go to the positive bus bar. Now I'm going to connect the opposite side. Unfortunately, the cable I had existing lugs on it which needed to be cut off, and I replaced it with the larger 3/8 lug so it would fit on all these terminals. These are much larger terminals. So, and I left the cable a little bit long because I want to be able to move the bucket around a little bit. And I'm going to cut a tail off the other end, but I'd like it to be a usable length, or I might make a bus bar or something out of it. So I'll have this one angled upwards a little bit here. Okay, that torque down. I sit like this. So I'll go ahead and attach that to the wall. I'll run it into the box. Now I'm going to run this cable up, punch through the box, and then into the 200 amp fuse inside. I want enough room space here where I can drop the box on the floor, but I'd like this end to have a usable length, so I could cut this off right here and just discard it, but no sense losing that lug. I might use this for another connection later. Kind of kind of like what I have with this piece over here, so I'll cut it about the same length. So I got a couple potential bus bars, or this end I'll strip. Okay, I'll leave it for right now. I'm not going to pull it all the way off until I'm ready. And I'm going to punch a hole in this container. Let me just come into this case and make a loop and stick the excess wire inside, so it's kind of out of the way. Yeah, that's actually better. When I need to move this battery, I'll just pull it out. But I've got this box moved around a little bit here, trying to access this thing a little bit better. So I'm going to try and insert this into the T-class fuse, hold it in there while I tighten the nut, the hex nut. Okay, the wire is in. I'm going to try and hold it there while I spin this, tighten this nut. Okay, it's starting to bite the wire, so it should hold the wire on its own here in just a sec. Alright, getting a good bite in there. Okay. Okay, that's good. Alright, looks like we got everything set up. I got the BMS up and running, Bluetooth on, active balancer is plugged in and active. Everything's torqued down, B minus, C minus is installed. The main power out to the inverter is installed. Now all we got to do is connect these up to the main bus bars going to the inverter. So take a look at that. I'm going to kill everything for right now. So I'm going to turn off that inverter, shut down this inverter. It's going to be a little bit less light in here because the lights are going off. I'm going to turn off that battery bank. Both of these battery banks are shut off. Both the power of the inverters are shut down. Let me see, how do I want to route this? I want this one. I actually think I'm going to swap these two. So I'm going to swap this battery. There's still room for one more battery bank. In reality, I'll probably upsize and put this 105 hour amp somewhere else. Okay, I don't have enough sun right now to even power the inverter, so they went into clicking, but I wired both of the wires in, the power positive and negative for this new battery. It's all wired in right now. What I'm going to do is I'm only going to power on the small battery. I've got the discharge actually off in the large battery. So the large battery is off. I'm going to go into the smaller battery we just built, make sure the discharge is on. The discharge is on. I'm going to go ahead and power up, send power to both inverters. And the inverters are powering up right now. Inverters are powering up, and there, the lights are coming back on. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the large battery. Right now, everything is running off of this new battery we just built here, so that's great. I'm going to make sure again, large battery is on. Discharge should be on. I'm going to turn the discharge on. Yes, turn it on. Discharge went on. I'm going to power the disconnect, and we're good to go. The JBD BMS is actively balancing it right now, or not actively, it's passively balancing it right now. The active balancer is hooked up and is running. I'll let this run for 24 hours, at least through a solar cycle also, and then I'll come back and do an update on what these numbers look like or what it's balanced out to. again, once it starts charging, I'm going to run it all the way up and let the BMS disconnect it at the 3.65 as soon as the first cell hits that, and then I'll let the active balancer take over and see how long it takes to balance these batteries. All right, I got a 24-hour update. It's about 4:15 p.m. The battery has been assembled and on an active balancer for about 24 hours now. Last night I put it on a generator with the charger and put it up to a full state of charge. I let the battery do its thing overnight, normal usage. And then today the solar power brought it up to a full state of charge. Right now it's discharging. Its minimum is 3.314 on one of the cells, and the maximum is a 3.318, a difference of 0.004. That's amazing. That's 24 hours. Now, granted, if your cells were really off in voltages when you first start this, you might want to try to top balance it. But if they're relatively close, I would just hook it up, put an active balancer on there, and call it a day. Well, that's it for this battery build. Appreciate everybody watching. Until the next time, take care.